What can we do well? Are we excited about building it? Is there a trend? Is there a growing audience? Is there someone who wants to play this game? All of those things come together, and it just so happened we were lucky enough to be in a situation where we could fund it, and we had people who know how to make this game, and we each have our own roles to play in that space. But it quickly moved us from the ideation phase to let's start building.
Welcome to UnNatural Selection, a show about competition, innovation, and the strategies shaping tomorrow's frontiers. I'm Nick Encina. Each week, we speak with pioneers shaping the future.
This is episode number 4. Today, we step into one of the fastest-moving environments on the planet, video games. This is a world where feedback is instant, competition is relentless, and failure happens in public. Products live or die based on whether they create joy, and they do it at a pace most industries never experience. That makes gaming a powerful window into how modern innovation really works. In this episode, we explore how teams stay creative under constant pressure, how outside influences, from fashion to sports, become unexpected advantages, and why the most experienced builders often struggle to see their own work clearly. This conversation shows what happens when experimentation isn't optional, it's built into the system. Our guest is Yohan Sengamalay. With a career that spans 3 decades, Yohan Sengamalay has been a leader in innovation in the gaming industry for some of the world's top companies, including Xbox, Amazon, Sony, and Activision. He started his gaming career at Microsoft, where he held product and marketing roles for the Xbox gaming division. His love of technology led him to Amazon, where he held positions managing partnerships for Amazon Studios, leading the advertising product team for the launch of the Fire TV, and building the gaming strategy for Amazon's Alexa voice service with companies that span the game landscape like Hasbro, PlayStation, and Paizo. A father of 3, Yohan currently resides in Seattle. Let's go.
Welcome, Yohan. It's great to have you here.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So that's extraordinary, and clearly you're like deep in the gaming world, and so I really look forward to learning about this industry. But just for a little bit of context for myself and for anybody listening, what in simple terms, what business are you in? Obviously gaming, but at a high level, like what business is this, and what's your role within that?
Yeah. So Last Keep, the studio that I'm at, we're in the entertainment business, right? Our primary function is to build content that entertains audiences, and my team's a small group. It's a 10-person studio, co-founded by myself and a couple of other industry veterans that I've worked with for the better part of 20 years. Um, our focus is really on a subset of gaming because gaming has become so huge as an industry. It's really focused on strategy. It's where we sort of cut our teeth early in our careers, and it's an opportunity kind of for us to get back to our roots to a degree with Last Keep, but also to try something new as the industry has changed so much and has grown. Yeah, so it wasn't a simple answer to your question because I think you can take it from a few different angles, but yeah, we make video games.
I love that. And, I mean, you mentioned how the industry's evolved so quickly just within our lifetimes. It's amazing how much stuff has evolved just within our lifetimes. But I mean, I'm old enough to remember Atari, Commodore 64, those early versions of video games that I was too young to own, or though Atari, I do recall. But, how it has evolved from the early days of Atari and Pong to Nintendo, all the way through some of the three-dimensional video games that started popping up in the 80s to where it is right now. And I've lost track since then. But how much did those early years influence you as a kid?
I would say, gaming has always been a part of my life. Video games from an early age. To your point, I'm old enough as well to remember the Atari, the Vectrex, and sitting in my basement with my brother playing the first home consoles was life changing. It was incredible. It was you know one of those things as a pretty introverted little kid. It was not only a gateway to new worlds, but it was also social. It was also social. That's as crazy as that is to say. My friends would come over and we would all sit around and we would, play games and take turns because you couldn't play multiplayer back in those days. And we'd sit on our couch and play them. And so it was a way to bring people into your world as well. And so, yeah, I would say it's always been a part of my life. it is an industry like a lot of industries, as you said. We've had the opportunity because it's tied to technology because we've been a part of this incredible growth in technology over the last 20, 30 years. It's an industry that's always been tied to latest technology, right? And we would always talk about this at Microsoft, and the idea that gaming, whenever there's a new sort of major piece of technology that takes hold with consumers, gaming is there in the forefront of either being a part of that, driving that technology, or in innovating on top of that technology. You know, from the internet to mobile phones to virtual reality, so many of those new technologies to voice that I got to work on at Amazon. Excuse me. Um, there's so many different ways that gaming just naturally finds its way into those new technologies. It capitalizes on trends, and so that allows it to grow and change and create new play patterns and bring in new audiences.
Yeah. And obviously, you had a passion for playing these things when you were a kid. Did that develop into more of a vocation for what you studied in school? Like, was your in other words, were you directed towards gaming from the very early on, or did you kind of take a meandering path and somehow end up in the gaming world?
Absolutely the latter. I think I always wanted to find my way into this space because I think as a kid I was always so curious about how these games were made. And I remember standing in line with my mom. I was probably about 12, 10, 12. I'll get it wrong, but sitting in line in the mall at the Sears checkout counter, buying my first Super Nintendo game. So this must have been I'm going to get
Yeah.
this wrong, but sometime in the mid '80s, maybe the late '80s. And my mom looked at me and said, Johan, why are you going to spend all of your money on this? It's a waste of time. And that quote has always stayed with me. Love my mom; she's the greatest person. She's one of my best friends. Um, but it always stayed with me because it was more than just, "Hey, I'm going to play this game with my friends." I was just so curious about a new game that was coming out, a new world that was being created. Who came up with this stuff, and how was it? You know, how for me that was always it was curiosity. It was just, I mean, to dumb it down and make it at its basis level, it was I wanted to know, I was hungry to know how these were made, and I didn't go directly there. Back then, when I went to college in the mid-90s, there was no path to gaming. There was no, you know, major you could take that would get you on a path to this. I wanted to be a journalist. It was weird. So I wanted to write, which I guess in some ways fueled where I wanted to get to. But um, I graduated from college. What you didn't have in the bio is I actually spent a number of years in the sports industry when I first got out of college. It was my first few jobs were working in sports, a similar industry, right? It's about entertaining people. Glacially slow to innovate. It does. People, there's always new technology coming into sports, but it's a lot slower than gaming in other industries. And actually, I used that work in sports to actually get me into partnerships with gaming companies, and that's how I finally found my way there. But I definitely meandered. Once you get into gaming, at least for me, and I've said this to numerous people, I knew it got into my blood. I just loved the speed in which things are created and the innovation that you can have and the creativity and the people that you get to meet. It's just it's consuming. It's intoxicating. And so yeah, no, I would say that those early days were definitely a part of what drove me to where I am today. A lot of it also was. But honestly, failing in other industries and finding my way to a place that I felt home, felt at home in. I've always said that I will want to make games till I can no longer do it. Either the industry
Mhm.
says you're too old, you're out of it, we don't want you anymore, or I just can't do it anymore. And I stayed kind of true to that. It's why I've been in it for 20 some years.
Yeah, I mean, it's again fascinating how much it evolved, and it's interesting as an aside. I used to play a lot of video games growing up as well, and I don't know how much of an impact that had into me becoming a computer scientist. But and I know we talked about you have 3 kids, right? I've
Mhm.
got 2 kids as well, and you hear about the downsides of gaming and the impact it can have on kids. And I'm sure there's truth to that in psychology, but I can't help but think of my experiences gaming when I was a kid. I definitely felt the addiction. I'd be at school thinking about the game that I was going to play when I went home, right? But that said, Looking back, I remember, the concepts around strategy that I learned from that. It helped me develop a comfort around electronics and a dexterity to be able to play with those fine motor movements and coordinate what I'm doing with my fingers with what's happening on the screen, to be able to virtualize some of those concepts as well. And then it also helped me think through kind of storytelling. I remember playing the early versions of Zelda and thinking about the stories that went behind all these video games that I played. And so many times in very indirect ways, things that I do today kind of link back to what I learned just by playing these fantasy video games 30, 40 years ago. So I think there's definitely a benefit to there to children. Obviously, to extremes, anything is bad. But you mentioned like you wanted to be a journalist, and I wonder to what extent it was precipitated by the storytelling that you saw in the video games that you were playing as a kid.
I think that you've hit the nail on the head. And just quickly, you made a comment about how games build dexterity, those sorts of things. I have a dear friend who is a heart surgeon, and he plays video games to keep kind of sharp when it comes to you're talking about precise movements, things that obviously are much more much more impactful than playing a game, but he uses that as a way to keep I would say current and able to do his job. And so yeah, I think to your question about storytelling, absolutely. I think narrative and stories and building worlds and delivering it to people in a way that they can consume. I think that's the really valuable piece of it. Understanding how people consume content and what makes them excited about something. Those are important pieces of journalism. They're important pieces of being an author, and certainly of building a world in video games and other and in entertainment as well. So yeah, absolutely.
That's cool. So now if we project forward a little bit, you ended up at Microsoft and then eventually Amazon, and you participated in all these incredible platforms that define the gaming industry today. Um, what 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 were those cultures like? I mean, I would imagine the pace of innovation right now in video games is like incredibly fast, but it probably has always felt fast. It's just increasing. So I would imagine that was a very fast-paced, innovative environment to be like. How do these, especially big companies, I mean, Microsoft, Amazon, they're not small companies. How do they foster a space of creativity and psychological safety to be able to be creative and create these things, right? Because again, you're creating a video game. It's not just throwing pixels on a board. It's like storytelling, it's creativity, it's design. You need a space where you're free to be able to explore these things in ways that are also very experimental because you don't know what's going to work.
Yeah, it's not an easy answer. Or I would say every company has done it differently, and I would say they've also evolved over time. When I was at Microsoft in the late aughts, um, it was the Xbox 360 generation, so two and a half console generations ago. Xbox was very much a startup within Microsoft. It was a bunch of I'm being reductive here, so please, fellow colleagues, don't get angry at me, but it was a bunch of folks who were just hungry to build something great. And but we had the backing of Microsoft Office and Windows, billions of dollars. So honestly, it was actually a little bit of an artificial safety net to be able to innovate. And there were some incredible franchises and games we were able to make because we didn't have to worry about running out of money within reason, right? You couldn't just spend uh, on everything, but it was a lot safer in that way because of the fact that we had a huge multi-billion-dollar company behind us who wanted innovation, who wanted a consumer product. Honestly, Microsoft at that point, that Xbox was the tip of the spear for their consumer story, right? It was before Surface, it was before a number of other of their consumer-facing products, and so they wanted this to be something they could put forth and could get people excited and build brand loyalty and those sorts of things. And so I would say Microsoft was very much a unicorn in that way. And it was awesome. It was wonderful to be able to be a part of that because you were able to see such brilliant creative people in a setting where they were given the freedom to to quite frankly, to create great stories. And you look at some of those franchises that came out during that generation. You mentioned them in the bio. You know, the Halos of the world, the Forza Motorsports, Gears of War. There's so many great now. What I would say are entertainment franchises. They're more than just video games now that came from that time. Because of the fact that Microsoft created that really amazing sort of environment to be able to innovate. Um, Amazon similarly, when I moved to Amazon, it was the beginning of their game studio and their game sort of a strategy. They had not been, besides being a platform for others to build games on, like their Fire tablets. They had not created their own content, and so it was similar. Amazon had a different approach, which was very much sort of almost startup-ish, startup adjacent in that Amazon had a culture of test and learn, fail quickly, right? Whereas Microsoft's was much more, let's take our time and build something we love. Amazon's was get something out there, try it, see what the customer says, because everything is about the customer, and quickly iterate, quickly iterate. And I loved that. That to me was fantastic because one of the negatives, or one of the things that I found difficult about Microsoft in that respect, was it could take years, it could take 4 or 5 years for you to get something to market. At Amazon, it was much faster. So you saw two huge multi-billion-dollar companies with very different approaches to how you bring things to market, how you test and learn. Yeah, so it was a great experience for me because I got to do that from the comfort of a huge company, learn from industry veterans, and then when I went to do it myself, I kind of took the things that I liked about each of those and tried to bring that. That's what we do, right? We learn from others, we learn from experience, we learn from failure more than anything, and then we try to apply that if we're smart about it, and that's how I've kind of it's sort of the teachings and the learnings that I try to bring to a small studio.
Yeah, no, it's fascinating. And yeah, and I think the the way that you described your experience at Microsoft and Amazon is from an outsider, it's what the impression that I've gotten about them as companies in the fields where I do interact with them. You know, whether it be office, cloud, and so on. Like they do have a different approach. It works for both of them. They're both obviously incredibly successful companies, but it goes to show the psychology, the strategy, the culture behind these things. And it's interesting to see how obviously they both work. But
Mhm.
then for you to take all of that into your experience nowadays, you mentioned something earlier on about gaming being at the forefront of these things, whether it being participating in the evolution or even leading in some of these technologies. And it's obviously made huge leaps over the last 30 or 40 years since it kind of started back with Pong and all these other, platforms. How have you seen the field evolve over the last since you've been in it, like professionally over the last like decade or 2 decades, I believe, 3 decades? What have been like the big inflection points? Like everything, it's like somehow all of a sudden, like things are progressing, they're evolving at a steady clip, and then boom, something happens. You're like, wow, that's a whole event change that now unlocks a whole new way of doing business. Potentially like in computer science has been like, cloud, and it's been like the internet, obviously, and the browsers. And then before you knew it, there were mobile. And then now you have AI, which we'll get to in a second.
Mhm.
How has gaming evolved over the last 3 decades?
Well, I think you touched on a number of the major sort of milestones just right there. I think they're similar. The growth of the internet, I think it converted what I talked about before, playing a game with friends in your living room to playing with anyone anywhere. Mobile phones, obviously, it brought a not only did it bring a new form factor to playing games, you could take games with you anywhere you go. It also brought in billions of new gamers, people who had always seen gaming as, not to be super reductive, the kid in his basement playing a video game was the sort of that was the stereotypical image of a gamer. Now it's everyone. Now it was everyone. Anyone could play, Clash Royale or gosh, I'm gonna mess this up. Everyone's gonna get mad at me for the mobile games, Brawl Stars, and these games that are much more approachable. As I said, they're in your pocket, so you're sitting at the gate waiting for your flight. You could play solitaire for 5-10 minutes, right? It made the game industry so much different, and there were different business structures that came from that, right? The free to play model completely changed the way the industry has kind of progressed. Right up until that point, it was very much a premium product business. Yes, there were post-launch downloadable content packs you could buy and things like that, but very much you paid for the game you wanted to play on the day it came out or the day you bought it, and that was it. And now you had created these products that millions, tens, hundreds of millions of people could play for free, and then they would transact. Oh, I want to buy this. I want to buy that, and they would, and it created new play patterns. I mentioned that before. It also the the notion you mentioned about kind of addiction. It also created some unnatural, unhealthy ways to engage with content, right? Where we want you to come back. We want engagement is the key. So bringing you back is my number one incentive as a game developer if I have a game like that. And so how do I make you feel bad about not being there? Right. And we talk about this a lot in our games is how do we make it so that you can come at your own pace, but we still need to make money. We still need to make money as a game studio. So it's an interesting balance. But so mobile was huge, tectonic shift. And then there was the pandemic. I think the pandemic is another one that we're still kind of figuring out our way from. Depending upon where you were and how you the laws and the rules of where you were stuck at home for at least a few months, if not some people were at home for over a year and cut off from their friends, cut off from their loved ones. So interacting over the internet and playing games together was a way to bring people together. And you saw a shift from I play a game with you and it's got a very specific focus. Let's say we're playing a co-op strategy game together. We have our world, we know what we're supposed to do. There were these games that came out that were about just hanging out and spending time together. You didn't have a purpose. You didn't have to go defeat the enemy. Animal Crossing from Nintendo was a great example of that. Perfectly timed, if you could say so, what they call a cozy game now, which was I don't want to stress. I don't want to have this goal that is bearing down on me and I have a time limit to get to it. I just want to hang out on my island and plant some flowers. And it worked really, really well. And I think the industry grew, as you can imagine, way faster than anyone expected because all of a sudden everyone was home and was spending money on nothing but that. And again, I'm oversimplifying, but you get my point. And then everyone started to get out and the world started to get back to the normal balance of things. And the games industry kind of panicked. And that's where we are right now, which is pulling back from a lot of the investments that were made thinking that it was going to continue on this incredible trajectory, and it's not anymore. It's now getting back to it's normalizing, I guess is the right way to say that. And so where do people want to spend their time? They're still playing games. They're still playing games at record numbers, but it's changing. And so I'm going on and on and on, but I think those are the key ones, at least in the last 10, 15 years, those key moments that have not only, I would say, driven innovation, but also driven the industry to grow, mature, and actually have had to figure out risk for the first time, right? Figure out how to manage actually a downturn in engagement on certain platforms. And there was so much investment during COVID and right after because it was like, hey, people are going to spend all their time doing this. Let's just throw more content at them. And quickly we're finding that there's only so much time in the day that you have for all of your entertainment, right? And so you aren't sitting at home for 12, 13, 16 hours a day just consuming TV shows, movies, video games. So now you have 2 hours, an hour maybe, and all of those things. A book? Like how am I gonna get some of that time from you as a game studio?
That's interesting. Yeah, I hadn't even thought about that. Kind of like the the huge swell of attention that went towards gaming because of COVID. I could definitely see that. Now, thinking through what that looks like in a post-COVID world where people are now diversifying their attention span and how you're competing with Netflix. It's not just other games. You're competing with what other people, the bicycle ride, right? How do you get people's attention there? Um, no, that's definitely fascinating. And now we're here and we talked about where technology's gotten gaming and where gaming's gotten technology. Where do you see the gaming world kind of evolving over the next 5 years or so?
I think what you're going to see, I think we're seeing two extremes, two ends of the spectrum. We saw the investment and the incredible excitement about the growth of the industry during those COVID years. We're seeing a dramatic pullback now, where a lot of investors, especially those who are not historically in this industry. They invested because it was a great investment opportunity, pulling back quickly and almost as you can imagine in any of these things, pulling back sharply, dramatically. Don't want anything to do with it. Don't want to touch it. It's too much risk. Um, the truth lies somewhere in the middle, and I think you'll start to see it normalize somewhere over the next few years, hopefully sooner rather than later, because I know a lot of um, people aren't making games right now. They're scared to make a game that is going to
Mhm.
fail, and so I think you'll start to see that changing in the next 2 to 3 years. I would say even starting this year, but certainly as we get 3, 4, 5 years out, it'll become more of a steady state. Hey, we know where the industry is going. We know what people are playing, and we're not going to just sort of cut everything off. This is a really interesting time for games because the industry has matured, as we've talked about. It's also matured. I'm going to use a word. I'm not sure it's the right one, but I think it's the right one for the moment. Artificially, there's these things that have happened that have pushed it into certain places faster than I think it was ready. And we talk a lot about what it takes to be successful when you launch a game now versus before. Everything was new before. So everything was an innovation. Everything was a new type of game. I remember sitting in the Babbages or the GameStops when I was a kid, and every game on the shelf was something different. It's not that way anymore. And so I think you mentioned it. Some of it is timing and messaging and getting the right audience to pay attention. There are games that launch now. Historically, if you launch a game and it didn't do well in the first month or two, it was never gonna be good. It was never gonna it was never gonna be successful, pardon me. Now you see games that launch and they have a slow ramp up because A, the technology allows you to do that, but also because people can then, via word of mouth and other mechanisms, get people to come play with them. And all of a sudden, 3, 4, 5 years later, they're doing incredibly well. So it's an interesting time when you look at where we are right now to where we will be in 5 years. I think optimistically, I think the industry will have kind of found its footing again. It's an unstable footing right now just because of the fact that there's been so much pullback. I also think that you look at technology and you referenced it. Technology like AI. Um, there's other, I would say, other innovations over the past few years. Web 3 was one that kind of popped up for a period of time. The games industry was really pulled in as like, what are you going to do with this? Isn't this incredible? And kind of pulled back and said, no, no, no. There's no great consumer benefit here. I think AI is kind of in that same boat right now, which is uh, it's gonna be great for, for cutting costs and other things like that, but is it good for the art form of gaming? Is it good for consumers? Because I think what you will find is unless AI can give you a tangible, uh, real tangible customer benefit, it's gonna be perceived negatively in the community. Gaming is very much a tight-knit community, and so, those are the sorts of things that I think we'll see flesh out over the course of the next few years. I have my own personal opinions on things like that, and I see AI as a tool, a way to create things, to make jobs easier. I don't think it's a way to remove, I would say, huge swaths of costs from game development, the way that I think a lot of people are hoping. Um, but it definitely will play a part in where we are in 5 years. It's an important piece of I think where all technology is going. I'm sure you interact with AI every day of your life now. I'm sure there's something. I try to tell my eldest son not to interact with AI as much as possible in school because that seems to be where people are trending. But no, it's a tool, right? And so I'm bouncing around a little bit here to tell a story of where I think there are little pieces that will then influence where this industry goes.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think it's fascinating. Yeah, I see AI from an outsider again. It's interesting because and it's tough to tell the economics of video gaming, right? Because on the one hand, I could see how much investment goes into making a Halo. But at the same time, on the other extreme, you have kids in high school making video games with the technology's been democratized. So you can make apps pretty simply. And so it's like these massive extremes, and I'm sure stuff in the middle, which is like you spend billions on a Halo and you can spend like $100 and build an app and just throw it out there and see what happens. And and then with AI, yeah, sure, you could spend tons of money building your own LLM that's going to do all kinds of wondrous things and design and build a video game for you. But where I see it also potentially playing in is the storytelling part. We talked about video games, and there was that fascinating story component to it. And back when I was playing video games, initially, the story usually split in very limited ways. It's like at this fork, you have one of two choices. You go left or you go right, and then your story evolves from there, but it's almost always at this binary step. And then games started becoming much more complex, but now you play Zelda and you can go in all kinds of different directions, but still the board is fixed and the bad guys are fixed. And then it starts evolving more where you now in Minecraft build your own worlds. So to me, that storytelling component and the flexibility now becomes almost limitless with an AI agent that can help foster and build that for you depending on which direction you go.
Absolutely, and I mean, we could sit here and talk about AI for well over the time we have. There's so many things, even just building a relationship with a character in the game that knows what you've done and knows the decisions you've made. You could even think beyond this. Now I'm getting into crazy theoretical land, but where it knows what you did in other games
Yeah.
and can advise you based on that. So there are absolutely incredibly powerful ways that AI can benefit you, especially as you said in narrative and also in guidance. In helping you through games. A lot of games are quite honestly challenging by design, and some people, we talk about play patterns, don't have the time to devote, 10 hours to memorizing the Wikipedia that is all the rules and all the options. How do you guide someone through those games? AI can absolutely be a powerful tool for that. You still get enjoyment out of playing and out of experiencing that universe. Maybe you aren't, the grognardy, I'm gonna learn everything about this game person, but you wanna be able to engage with it. So I think there's numerous ways that AI will be unlocked in gaming. I think those are the pieces that get me excited about technology like that because it's additive. It's accretive to what we're building, the universe we're building. You talked about, build a universe and bring people in, and how do you get them to feel at home there? And I think those are ways that it can be used.
Yeah. And yeah, like you said, I mean, we could go on forever on all the speculation of how AI is going to change the industry and everything else in technology for that matter. And, we've talked about these leaps that the technology in the industry is going from a very pixelated environment to something that's more refined to a storyline that evolves to I remember certain things as a kid remembering back when video games made leaps like all of a sudden it became 3D. It's like, wow, this is like three-dimensional, and that was amazing. And then eventually Quake came around, and it was so interactive and so amazing. And I remember witnessing the whole Pokemon effect with virtual reality and how that affected the world, right? And so all these things are like these massive inflection points. And now obviously AI at the very beginning of influencing that. And all of this has obviously brought an industry that's matured as well. How have you seen how has the gamer, like the actual gamer, changed in that time? Do you see a different perception or how you market, how you story tell? What's your perception on the gamer and the gamer's evolution over the last couple of decades?
Yeah, I mean, their expectations have changed and evolved, and obviously a maturing industry. There's been fragmentation into different communities, right, of gamers, right, and so as you were asking that question, I thought of a quote, and I don't know if I can attribute this to him, but one of my good friends who led a pretty big game studio in Finland, always used this one quote that said, "In the games business, you need to forget everything you've learned every 5 years." And obviously, it's hyperbolic, but it talks about change and it talks about growth, right? It talks about, hey, if we sit as the old man on the lawn, get off my lawn forever, we are never going to stay with the industry, and so you need to have a level of curiosity. You have to also have a level of, quite frankly, introspection to be able to listen and learn from the community. And I think the community is, as you said, has evolved a lot during that time as well. It is now, when you talk about bringing a game to market, it's amazing how if you say my game is X and you say what category it's in, it will change the expectations immediately of the people playing it, as opposed to if you say it's another type of game, even if it's the same game, because there's expectation. There's, oh, you said you make strategy games. I expect Right? I expect critical thinking. I expect problem solving. I expect to be able to do some sort of resource management. I'm getting into the weeds here, but there's all of that. And then if you don't provide that, even if you've given what you think is a strategy game to that customer, their expectation hasn't been met. And so
Mhm.
I think that level of growth, maturity, and also expectation setting, and being able to, as a game developer, provide in all honesty, messaging is and storytelling is so important. The right set the right expectations with the community. Um, the other piece of it is the community believes, and rightly so, that they are a part of the process. Do not just give me a game at the end of this, for the most part, and tell me this is your game. I want to be a part of you making this game. And you see that not only in some of the big games, how their communities grow and what they build post launch in terms of the new content that they put out, but also even in indie size studios providing more to customers upfront before they buy the game and getting
Mhm.
feedback. It used to be, again, this is the old person, old marketing person who used to launch physical products, physical disc we used to put in a store. You didn't tell anyone about the game other than through the trailer and through your marketing, right? That was they saw nothing. They knew nothing about the story other than what
Yeah.
you told them. Now you open a lot up earlier and you build that community through that trust, through that feedback loop with customers, which I think is really exciting. It's scary too, because if they hate what you're doing, it's hard to come back from it. It's hard
Mhm.
to rebuild that. But it's actually a very honest way to do things that it's refreshing. And it's actually really exciting to see a mature gaming community that wants to be a part of the process. If they buy into the vision of what you're providing, and are a part of that, they're loyal. And then you see the growth of, the influencer community and streaming. That's become its own marketing vehicle because if you can get people who have an audience excited about your game, playing your game, all of a sudden their audience trusts you, believes in what you're building. That was a very meandering response to a simple
No,
question.
no,
But
it's great. I think it's fascinating. I mean, the components that go into this from storytelling, what you guys have is a very engaged clientele, right? And we talked about Microsoft and Amazon in the beginning and their approach to designing, which is they have different approaches, but it's still very close to the client. Find out what they want. Don't go off and build something in a vacuum somewhere and come back and expect people to like it. You guys have effectively your customers are designing with you. They're like
mhm.
code developers, say like, no, 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 I don't like that color. Make it this shade of green or something like that. And so it just puts your thumb is on the heartbeat of what these people want, and it's interesting how fascinating how uh, passionate they are, right? Because one of the things that I saw this industry as being, when we think about the business, I kind of think of it as also like fantasy because I can't remember a single video game, and maybe there are different ones, but the ones that I always played, I almost identified with the main character. If I was playing Zelda, like that was me. When I lost, I would get pissed because I'm like, I can't believe I just lost, right? I have built an entire arsenal of weaponry and points and coins and all that stuff that's mine. I built that over hours and hours of dedication to this game, and where this character goes defines where I'm going as a person. I identified with that. And so I to me a lot of times or Quake, like any one of these games,
Mhm.
it's like I identified with whatever character I was playing. So for me, a lot of it was not only the video game and entertainment aspect, but there was a fantasy involved in that as well that came with the story, the music, the whole arch of the character was part of what I defined and identified with, which is what had got me addicted to it.
Yeah, and I mean, that's why those worlds are so powerful, right? It's why people spend so many hundreds of hours in them. Then you layer on games now like that are open-ended, like Minecraft that you mentioned, where I can make my own universe. My daughter plays Minecraft. You mentioned it in the bio, in the intro, and it wasn't this last spring break, but it was a couple of vacations ago. We didn't go anywhere, and my daughter says to me, she's 10, "I want to make a roller coaster theme park this week, Dad." And so she just sat there, and it was fascinating, Nick, to watch a 10-year-old building roller coasters in Minecraft. She knows where to start. She knows how to get all these things going. I could build blocks, and I could build the the entrance to the theme park and that sort of thing. She could get this thing working. Like oh yeah, yeah, I got to run this I got to run this power cord over here, and I've got to put these, and I can't even remember all the different tools she used. And you flip that switch over there, it starts that roller coaster, Dad, and it goes through the loop, but don't sit on that part. Like she, within minutes, could do this, and you realize how much time and energy, and you said passion goes into it from a customer standpoint. You put part of yourself
Mhm.
into this, and I see that every day when we talk to customers, and we're in the building process of our game, right? We're still in the we are building the game. It's why I love the studio that I work at right now. I love our team because they have that quote that you have to be comfortable forgetting, what you've learned every 5 years, because part of that is quite honestly listening to somebody else who doesn't have your experience and going, oh, they may be right about this. Like that's hard for somebody who's been in an industry for 20 something years, has a lot of pride in what they've done, to be able to take that feedback. Oh, I just spent 2 weeks writing this story and they don't like this.
Yeah.
I need to change that. Like that's hard for people, and I
Well,
love that about our team. And honestly, good game studios have that ability to listen.
so exactly to that point, these final few minutes that we have, I want to kind of pivot really quickly to innovation strategy. And again, looking at it from the outsider, you have to keep saying that clause because I've never been a part of that industry. I can talk until I'm blue in the face and innovation for healthcare and life sciences. But in your space, with everything that we just talked about, with the emergence of new technologies, the evolution and maturity of the business, the evolution of the gamer, and all the storytelling and everything, the competition that's out there, the availability, what your investment strategy is. Do you go for the cheap phone apps that you can build in a weekend, or do you invest, $500 million into a Halo? Um, how when you sit down in the studio that you're in right now, and you guys are thinking about designing a new game, how do you approach it? Like, especially because we're talking about fantasy, right, Johan? I mean, like
Mhm.
literally, you can take it in infinite directions. So, how do you then think? How do you make the leap from we're at zero, let's build something that millions of people are going to want to play all the time? Like, how do you bridge that divide?
At every level, it's been different, right? And so I'll use right now because it's closest, nearest and dearest to my heart, but also it's been it's the most recent thing that I've had to go through, right? We 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 are self-funding this studio, right? So it's our money going into this. As we look at as we looked at what we wanted to create, there's the basic formula, right? What are we excited about playing? What are we excited about making? What are we capable of making? Right? Those are the quick things you go through. And if you've been in the industry long enough, you know. So like hey, all right, well, we've got a bunch of folks who came from ensemble studios and have a background in strategy, as I mentioned earlier. So let's start with that. Let's start. We luckily strategy games are going through a bit of a resurgence right now. So trends, right? There's kind of a return to some of those nostalgic games of old. Um, for a number of reasons, we could spend hours talking about it, but let's just talk about it in the bucket of what's happening in the industry, and are you capitalizing on a moment in time that's right for what you're building, and that's important. So listening, learning, I don't want to call it chasing a trend, but certainly being acknowledging what's happening within the industry, figuring out, how do we map what we're good at to that, right? So we can build strategy games, but that wasn't enough, right? That's not enough for us because you said we want a game that is not only one that we want to play and are excited about and have a passion for, but also that millions will want to play. And so then you look at, okay, what is something that could be new, something differentiated about a strategy game? There's a lot of games, as I mentioned just now, that are coming back that are really tapping into nostalgia. Um, and either they're remakes of old games that actually we worked on, like Age of Empires remakes, or they are, I would say, what's the right way to say this? Spiritual successors, right? They're based off of a franchise that was quite successful, but it's a new IP. Um, our approach was okay. That's great. That's what people are doing, and it's having success. We wanted to do something a little different, and that's where the risk comes in, right? We wanted to bring something in that isn't necessarily what someone else is doing because it differentiates you. You puts you in a place where you people immediately take notice, and we use our history. Certainly, I would say we use our heritage as a way to get people to notice what we're doing. But also, it's modernizing, and it's we talk about play patterns and all those sorts of things. So we looked at what are the trends in games, what are the trends in platforms and in usage, right? So we see right now mobile is growing still. There's a new generation of PC gaming that is mobile now. It is these little portable PCs are becoming very successful, led by the Steam Deck, which is made by Valve Corporation. Um, and the idea that strategy games have always been games that you sit at your desk, you spend hundreds of hours playing them. You mentioned it. You devote so much time. Is that where this audience is going? They're getting older. They have kids. They have families. They have jobs. Is that where we want to put all of our money? I mean, I used to play Civilization when I was in college. I would spend 20 hours just learning the game. I don't have that time anymore. So our hypothesis, based on our own growth and in talking to customers, was, hey, there's a growing trend of people that want smaller game experiences, but still scratches that strategy itch. And so again, all of this is, you know, what can we do well? Are we excited about building it? Is there a trend? Is there a growing audience? Is there someone who wants to play this game? All of those things come together. And it just so happened we were lucky enough to be in a situation where we could fund it and we had people who know how to make this game. And, we each have our own roles to play in that space, but it quickly moved us from the ideation phase to let's get start building. Let's get the
Yeah.
folks in to start building this thing. And that's really fun. And I said to you, the one great thing about the folks I work with is that we kind of have this ability, they're comfortable being uncomfortable. And I love that, right? I love the idea that we sit in rooms, we're fully remote. So we sit in our own rooms and we talk about things that have been on our mind. Why is this not feeling right? And we're comfortable sharing that. The other day, I was talking to our game designer who had spent a few hours writing a story, and I said, I just don't like this story. Like, I didn't want to be cruel, but I don't. It doesn't connect with me. And he's like, well,
Mhm.
Johan, you got to give me more than that. And so I tried to verbalize, frustratedly, how I felt about the story, and eventually we worked out that it was just a couple of lines in the story that just didn't sit right. And then we went our merry way. I want to mention something. Making a game remotely is really hard, and so um, a lot of those things
Well,
you would
yeah,
do at a coffee.
it's a creative field, right? I mean, creative fields, yeah, it helps to be in front of a whiteboard with a colleague or multiple colleagues, just drinking a beer or over lunch and having a conversation face to face. You can iterate and scratch and draw and
Exactly.
so on, right?
Precisely. And so being able to work well with folks remotely is invaluable. It's so different than the creative process as you mentioned, Nick. And so you don't want to schedule time for a brainstorm. You want to be able to have a coffee and lunch and talk about the things that are on your mind. And I love the fact that we're able to do that. I think I meandered off of your original question there, but I think
No,
all of those
no.
things drive I guess drive what decisions you make around product. We are a small studio, so we can't make a Halo. We can't make an Age of Empires, nor do we want to. But I would say when you look at it also from the context of what are your limitations, what can we do with
Yeah.
what we have? That's an important piece also in defining what we're going to do.
Yeah, it makes sense. And looking at a product portfolio too, it makes total sense. When you're a small startup studio, you want to think obviously there's like short-term horizons, there's midterm, there's long-term if you want to go for that moonshot of what's going to be the big game in 5 years. But you guys have to show value today. And you focus on kind of like what are the trends, what are people playing, and especially as you see convergence now, you have 3, 4 decades of history of where the gamer's going. So you see where
Mm.
the puck is going. It's like, well, they're probably going to be here in 2 years when our game is ready. You look at your skill sets, you look at your history, you look at your domain expertise of how you know how to write a story, where to publish it, where to market it, what story to tell, all that kind of stuff. And I think one of the interesting things you said there is also you're looking at a specific demographic of clientele, which almost reflects your own, right? You're thinking about, I don't have 20 hours to dedicate to learning this game. So you're thinking about yourself, which actually brought me to a whole different set of questions, which is
Mhm.
basically you get to eat your own dog food in such a fun way. I mean, I've been in software, so there's elements of the product we're building. We get to eat our own dog food and try it. Does this help us be more productive or whatever? But it's not. It's fun in a way, but it's not fun like we're playing this game as we're building it. And then I can also think about the dynamics that go into being in person in the office, because now you and your colleague Michael or Johan or whoever, you play the video game. Now you bump into each other in the kitchen and be like, "Hey, did you get to this phase of the game? Oh my god, that was amazing!" Or "This didn't quite resonate. We should really change this." Right? That in-person dynamic as you're playing your own game must be such a thrilling experience.
Yeah, it's hard to really explain it to folks who haven't been in it because it's both thrilling and fun, and also you get really angry sometimes because you care so much about what you're doing, and so you have to try and funnel that feedback in a productive way because it is gaming. It is something that you imagine not only yourself but others spending hard-earned money on and their free time. It's free time that we're asking people to spend that they could be spending on other things, and so there is something you have to honor there in wanting to make it as good as fun as possible. "Oh, this was great. I had a really good time today, but I didn't like these 6 things." We're never gonna be perfect, right? Even the best movies have moments that drag on or, those sorts of things that they didn't get quite right. Same thing with video games. There is no perfect video game, but you wanna kind of look at it from that perspective, and so you spend so much time, and I've played this game for hundreds of hours at this point, and every time I play it, I try so hard, Nick, to just think about playing it for the first time.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's so hard to do, right? The first time, if I give you this game today to play it, you'll be playing it for the first time fresh. I play it today and I already know what I'm going to get 6 hours from now. And so it's very hard. That's why we bring in other folks because I want to not only have my, you know, understanding and feeling about the game projected into the feedback that we give, but also I want people to be able to tell us, hey, by the way, I know 6 months ago you changed this. It isn't good. Like, that's hard to hear. We made
Mhm.
that change so long ago, we've just kinda glossed over it because 'cause we've played it so many times. "Oh, that didn't go over well with you? Alright, we need to rethink it." It's fun to be able to say I played video games for work, for sure, so at its basis level, but I think it also is one of those things that requires you to have a bit of discipline, to be able to acknowledge the fact that you're playing something that, as I said, people are going to spend their hard-earned money and their time on. You need to make sure that when you spend this time, you're not just goofing off and playing a game. You're
Yeah.
picking it apart,
No, that
you
makes
know?
total sense. I mean, and you're competing in a fiercely competitive environment where all thousands or hundreds of thousands of game, developers are all competing for a very fixed amount of time in a very fixed pool of potential customers. And so you
Right.
have to be super diligent and very strategic in thinking about how you shape your game so that it differentiates. And you've been so, generous with your time. So I want to be cognizant of, not running too far along into this. So with everything we talked about, I mean, if you project into the future, what would you recommend for kids playing video games or, kids in college that are like, this is the industry I want to go to with, we talked about where it's evolving, how it's changing, all these different things. If your son was like, Dad, this is what I want to do. What advice would you give him right now to say like, okay, great. These are some of the things you should think about and how to position yourself to be competitive and successful in this field.
Yeah, I think it's a wonderful question, one I think about quite a bit because of what you just said there, Nick, having kids and, I think everything that I do, obviously being in games, there was probably 3 pillars for me of what made me interested in gaming. There was, is it something that I get excited about? I have a passion for, which we talked about growing up that way. Is it something that I think I can be good at? And then I think the most important one for me in some ways is what legacy can I leave, right? And what impact can I have on the industry that makes it better for others to come into and to, perhaps easier to get into or certainly more evolved than it was when I said I there was no um major for gaming when I was a kid or when I was going through college and it's true of everyone who was our age. So how do you leave that in a way that is valuable for the next generation? And I think to your point, the industry has moved so quickly. I think for the next generation, they're coming into an industry that is mature, that is um, kind of there's a playbook written in many ways. for it already, which is both exciting. You can have a major in college to be a computer science major or to be, in narrative game design. We've hired folks out of college who that was their major. That's phenomenal. They're so much smarter than I am when they come out of college. They've worked on games. They've built games to your point,
Yeah.
right? And I think that to me is, if someone wants to get into the games industry now, part of it is follow that path, follow the path that those who have come before you have kind of forged. But I mentioned it earlier. One of the key things for me was meandering through my career. I was in sports. I was in fashion. I always kind of knew I wanted to somehow get here, even if I didn't know it. Like I wasn't saying it out loud. I had to go into those industries, learn what I loved, learn what I didn't like about them, and take some of that with you. I think there's value in experience, in understanding, in lateral thinking, not to use an academic word, but like that kind of thing to be able to get real world experiences and then bring them to an industry like this that will always be evolving. I think that's the fun of it. The one piece I always say to my eldest is, if you want to get rich, don't get into video games because you're going to spend most of your career probably working on games that fail or games that have, that there are going to be games you work on that don't even come to light. They get cut before they even launch. So there's a lot of failure in gaming. So you have to be comfortable with that.
Hmm.
But once you find your foothold, it's a wonderful industry to be in. And so I think being able to listen, learn. I think we talked a lot about kind of checking your pride at the door. You see a lot of industry folks now who talk about their history. The best ones are the ones who keep rewriting it, keep like trying something new. So having that curiosity, I'm jumping all over the place, but that's been the formula for me. I think everyone's different, everyone's unique. So I always struggle to tell you what you need to do to become like me, but that's kind of what my story was. And it's worked well. Uh, it's an amazing industry. I would never, I think I said earlier, I think I want to do this until I can no longer do it. And I don't think that is, if you look back on your career and you can say that I think you've done something okay. You've done something all right.
No, I think so too. Yeah, you mentioned the lateral thinking. It's exactly what I was thinking. It's like, sure, there is the now with the evolution of the field, you have disciplines you could study this, right? But there's also something to be said for the meandering path that you took, which I've taken a lot in my career as well, which is like you got to see parts of the world in different industries in such a way that now when you're tackling a problem in this field, your brain can't help but be like, oh, wait, I saw something similar when I was in fashion. Maybe we can apply some of these principles there towards how we design this game and so on, right? So I'm a big fan of divergent and lateral thinking because I think it just kind of like brings ideas and enriches what you're doing currently. So hopefully kids, as they think about this industry, they think, yes, discipline and learn the field, learn from the people that came before you, and also try to diversify enough so you can bring new blood and new ideas into this. But with all that, Johan, this has been incredible. I mean, it's given me just an insight into a world that I only benefited from. I've never been able to contribute in any kind of significant way, but it's fascinating to see how quickly it's evolving. Your role in it, and I'm looking forward to. You want to tell us a little bit something about the game that you're working on right now, so we can keep an eye out for it.
Yeah, so the game that we're working on, it's called Fleet Breakers. It is, as I mentioned earlier, a strategy game. It's actually, and I'm going to throw this one out there for all of those who know the industry. It's an action strategy roguelike. So the idea of blending a couple of different genres, the idea of blending strategy games with the this sort of up and coming trending genre of games called roguelikes. I say that it's been around for about 20 years. But the idea that you can play a game, die or lose, and start over, but you bring some of the things that you gained during that last playthrough. I'm oversimplifying it. It's a new way to think of strategy games. I mentioned it earlier because it used to be you had to be perfect. You had to come up with that 20-hour plan and get it right. You don't in our game. You can try something new. You can experiment with a strategy that you hadn't used before because you're probably not going to succeed the first time. So you can learn something, bring it with you, try again. It's a fascinating idea. We've been, as I said, play testing it with folks. It'll be launching later this year, so definitely look out for it. We have a Steam page up. It's called Fleet Breakers. You can certainly search for it on Steam, which is the PC marketplace. And we'll be having an early access launch later this year.
I look forward to seeing that. So it almost it's like a video game with resurrection built into it.
It's exactly it. The premise is entirely that, and it is entirely about getting comfortable with failure.
I love it. Well, I think that's probably the best way to end it, because that's exactly what we talk about, whether it be video games or any other industry that I'm interviewing. It's all about being comfortable with failure and learning from that and iterating and having strategies and embracing the unknown, but also having tools and techniques and a mentality for how to succeed within that, with kind of the theme of this, the mapping towards evolution and survival of the fittest. How are you clever enough to be able to survive and thrive and do something worthy that is fulfilling for yourself and for others? So with that, Yohan, thank you so much for your time. It was a pleasure, and I look forward to maybe following up with you in the future, find out how this game goes.
I'd love it. Thank you so much for having me.
That was Yohan Sengamalay. Now, UnNatural Signals.
This episode shows us what innovation looks like when iteration is constant and failure is expected. First, play matters. The most successful products don't just function, they invite people into a story. When users see themselves as the hero, engagement follows naturally. The same idea applies in business. People commit to narratives, not features. Second, expertise creates blind spots. When you've lived inside a product for years, you lose the ability to experience it as a newcomer. The teams that survive build deliberate ways to challenge their own perspective and bring in fresh eyes early and often. Third, failure has to be survivable. In gaming, resurrection is part of the design. Loss teaches without ending the game. Organizations that adapt do the same, making mistakes fast, cheap, and informative rather than fatal. Yohan shows us that resilience isn't about avoiding failure, it's about designing for it.
Thanks for listening to UnNatural Selection. If you enjoyed the episode, subscribe, leave a review, and share it with someone shaping the future. Explore more at unnaturalselection.net and connect with us on LinkedIn and Facebook. Until next time, keep evolving.